We're going to start off by talking about Tier 2, and this is going to be a video that goes on YouTube, so everyone needs to say hello to the YouTube frogs as well, because I've abandoned them, all right? I have absolutely abandoned the YouTube frogs. So today, let's bring it up on screen. Valorant had this press release stuff where they were talking about the VCT 2023 Challenges system. And Challenges is just their way of talking about Tier 2. So I've already taken a look through all of this. And, you know, you can go and find it if you're watching the VOD afterwards or if you're watching along live and I'm scrolling too quickly or whatever. But I had an opportunity to talk before this announcement went out with some of the people that were in charge of putting the information out there. And so I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot to talk through this and give some, maybe not additional information, honestly, because it does look like a pretty expansive system. But, you know, any small questions that I asked, I can tell you the answers to as well. So, what is the basic thing here? The basic thing is the Tier 2 system in Valorant for 2023 is going to have a lot of different small leagues. I think they said 21. Yeah, total 21 Challenger leagues. So that is a lot of different stuff going on all over the place. They're going to have broadcast days that don't conflict with the big leagues so that you don't have to make that choice of whether or not you want to watch Tier 2 or whether you want to support Tier 1. That's pretty sick. And also, the biggest piece of news is that there's actually promotion now into the international leagues. Now, there is no relegation. So it's not a promotion relegation system where you fight against the worst teams that are in partnerships or franchising or whatever. You don't have that kind of situation. Instead, they've gone for quite an interesting approach that you can see in this graphic, where they are actually adding more teams to their partnered teams. And the teams that get in are going to be entitled to the same kind of stuff. They're going to be entitled to the revenue share. They're going to be entitled to the stipends that are like 600K minimum. They're going to be entitled to relocation support. So, yeah, they're entitled to some good shit. And then after 2 years of being able to play in the big leagues, they get dropped back into the Tier 2 system, and you have to earn your place again. So I think this is massive for organizations. For organizations that were on the outside looking in, because let's actually zoom all the way out, shall we? Let's zoom way out. When Valorant started, people knew that there was going to be some kind of franchise system, right? It's Riot, they're going to back it. They started moving into that direction with League of Legends and stuff already. So people knew that was going to be the case. If you talk to anybody that was on the ground floor of Valorant, literally up until like 6 months ago when this kind of stuff started getting properly announced, they were trying to invest really heavily in Valorant, mostly because they wanted to see if they could get into a system like that. It's not per se that Valorant is a great spot to be in as it runs currently in the open circuit kind of system. There'll be a lot of organizations that are out there pissing money away in the North American Tier 2 and Tier 3 circuits that didn't, have never had an opportunity to get masters or anything like that. But all of these big orgs were interested in Valorant early on because there was this partnerships model that they knew was going to be announced, or at least heavily suspected was going to be announced. So what you have is a massive wave of interest because they think the payoff is going to be huge in the future. And then what we saw within the last, I don't know, what would you say it was, like 4 months or something? I think it was about 4 months. People started dropping their teams. They started dropping their squads because they realized that they weren't going to get into franchising and they didn't know what else was there. Or at least they didn't have a concrete idea of where the return on investment was going to come from. So it's not so much that people started pulling the plug, but those people that the only reason they were in was to try and get into franchising, those started to pull the plug a little bit. And I think that this is going to tie it back into this announcement, this is going to provide some more of the stability to those organizations. Because if you're able to do well, if you're able to be the best team or the best organization, let's say actually, from EMEA, from, whatever of these EMEA, from Americas, from Pacific, if you're able to be the best team of the year from EMEA, Americas, Pacific, then you are going to have access to 600K stipends. I mean, maybe they changed the number, but that's what it's been reported to be at the moment. You're going to have access to buku bucks in terms of skin revenue sharing, and probably some like gun buddy stuff that they attach to guns as well. You're going to have legitimacy for your organization. You're going to have branding within the game, like huge stuff that organizations would kill for for at least 2 years. You've got guaranteed 2 years of being in there as an org. So I think that's fat. I think that's going to really provide the carrot on the stick. Carrot on the stick? The carrot. The stick is the opposite of the carrot. It's really going to provide the carrot to keep a lot of tier 2 organizations or tier 1 organizations that just haven't made it into franchising invested. So Bala, I actually asked about that. So Bala, when I go back to the webcam thing, it should pop up with your chat here, but it doesn't. Bala said similar league benefits is the key word. So I saw this. Where is this actually? It's somewhere around here. Here it is. So promoted teams will have the opportunity. Let's go back to this one. Promoted teams will have the opportunity to prove themselves during the VCT system, receive similar league benefits. So I asked, is this very specific language that means they actually won't get revenue sharing, or it'll be a reduced amount or something like that? And I believe that is going to, I believe they've used the word similar there. This is what I was told. They've used the word similar because it's not a permanent partnership, because it only lasts for 2 years. So it's not the same league benefits. You're not a permanent partnered team. You are going to drop out of it after 2 years. So it's not exactly the same, but it's similar in the sense that it's, as far as I'm aware, the same amount of revenue share, the same amount of stipends, the same location support. You are essentially a partner team for those 2 years, but you're not a real partner team because it drops off after 2 years' time. So I saw this wording and I thought, that's dangerous wording. Similar league benefits could mean anything. But as far as has been communicated to me, similar just means in terms of the length of time, not in terms of the materials involved. So I think that's pretty sick. So the promotion aspect is awesome. Here's where it gets pretty interesting, though, because after year 1, there are going to be, if you win in EMEA and you win in America and you win in Pacific, those 3 teams that did that are going into the franchise system, I guess. I'm sure they're not going to call it franchise system. They've called it International League. So maybe I should start calling it that as well, but whatever. We all know what I'm talking about, I think. The year after, you have another 3 that get promoted. From down here, sorry. You have another 3 that get promoted. So that's 36 teams overall. Then the year afterwards, there's a little asterisk here because those first teams that got promoted in 2023, those 2 teams are no longer involved. So it goes down to 34 and then it goes up to 39 because you start getting double promotions as well. 2 teams per year starting in 2026 will be promoted to international leagues. Does that math work? I feel like I've butchered the maths there somehow. Because you're getting 4 teams involved. Yeah, it drops down to 34. Wait, how are you getting the 5, actually? There should be 6 there. I'm not exactly sure how that works. Goes down to 33. Oh, of course it goes down to 33. How did I say it went down to 34? It goes down to 33, sorry. Yes, because these 3 teams disappear. And then it goes up by 6 teams because twice as many are getting promoted from the 2025 Ascension champions. So in 2025, you only need to make grand finals of Ascension, presumably, to qualify, which will be a bit of a funky system. That'll be a bit of a weird tournament, probably, but a cool idea anyway. So there are more slots available there. And so it ends up being 42 teams total is their goal number. And remember that this is going to be 42 teams might sound like a huge amount, which it is, but they're not expecting everyone to actually watch all of the games that are happening. The reason that they've segmented the system as into EMEA, Americas, and Pacific, they said that they'd done it via time zones. And that indicates to me that they're just expecting if you live in EMEA, you're going to be following the EMEA International League. If you live in America, you're going to be following the Americas International League. If you live in Pacific region, you're going to be following the Pacific's International League. If you're trying to follow all 42 of those teams, you're going to die. You're going to be locked in the VOD dungeon and you're going to rot away. So wish us all luck. Wish us on Plat Chat a lot of luck. But yeah, they're going to end with 42 teams, which when you divide by 3, that's 14 teams total in each international league, which isn't that bad, really. 14 teams seems pretty reasonable to me. But of those teams, 4 of them will be rotating yearly tier 2 organizations. So, cool idea. Here's where I start to have some damn, I wish they'd done it like this moments. because I think there's a couple of things that are unusual about this system. Of course, it is fantastic that let's just start here, though. I do want to give full props to Riot for this, because putting a system in place that has organizations thinking a 3-year plan, forces the tier 2 organizations that would be considering pulling the plug to actually invest in their teams, in their players, and will create a healthy, aggressive, competitive tier 2 system, I think. I think it'll be very good for organizations, and it'll be worth the investment. I think that's all accurate. But here's some stuff where I'm not sure it's as great from a player's POV or a viewer's POV. There's only one big tournament in the year. There are 2 splits with playoffs at the end of each, so that's great. And then there's one big LAN at the end of the year. So it's kind of like this year of the main EMEA thing. You have VCT Stage 1 with a little playoff. You have VCT Stage 2 with a little playoff. And then there's like a Champions-esque thing called Ascension at the end of the year. But there's no Masters tournaments in the middle there. There are playoffs, but there's no big LAN where you get to see the final culmination of a big winner in front of a big stage. Maybe that would be just too much for tier 2. But there's also no point in the entire year where the tier 2 teams play against each other internationally. And I think that's going to be... in some sense, it will make people really savor stuff for... and remember that this is only tier 2. So shift not... Whoa. Let's get this one very straight, because people are asking in the chat, do we not have any international tournaments for 2023? We absolutely have international tournaments for 2023. This is in tier 2. So what I'm saying is there is one big LAN event per region for tier 2. That's fucking awesome. A lot of scenes would kill for that shit. But there is no point at which the tier 2 scenes interact with each other. So if you're a fan of... Let's imagine that 2022 was the first year that this got implemented. So you have all of your big names from 2021, and then you have a team like The Guard, let's say, and you have a team like, EDG seems too silly to bring up, but Onslayers were formed at the beginning of this year, right? So you have like a team like Onslayers, let's say they were doing really well. You've got DRX and all the other top teams are still playing in the International League, but Onslayers is this squad that came out of nowhere, or not came out of nowhere, but had a couple of great players. And then you've got The Guard over there that really did come out of nowhere. Those 2 teams would never play against each other in the tier 2 circuit until they got into the International League. And I think that what that's going to do is make people salivate for watching them compete internationally. But it's going to put, in some sense, a premium on that international league, because Masters events, Champions events, where the regions mix, only exist for tier 1. But it does make sense. I mean, tier 2 is tier 2. You can't be running global events all the time for that kind of stuff. But all right, that's okay. Here's the thing that there's 2 areas where I think they've actually missed, though, with this. And one of them is that Challengers never feeds directly into global events. Challengers must always go into the international leagues before you ever have access to Masters or Champions. What I would have loved to see is the top teams from, let's say the top teams that win Ascension, get a wildcard slot to Champions for that year, because you know that they're going to get added for the next. But if you look at their calendar, and I've clarified this as well, the team that wins in 2023, let's use North America, for example. Let's say Fart Clan wins in 2020. Actually, Fart Clan's a terrible idea because it's not a real org, and to some extent need a real org to be attached to it for you to be promoted. Although that's another area that we can talk about for a while. But let's say it's who's an org? Shopify Rebellion, right? Shopify Rebellion are the champions in North America for 2023. You never get to see those guys compete in champions that year. You only get to see them at the beginning of the year after. So I don't know when the Ascensions tournament is going to be, but there's going to be multi-month break where you don't get to see those guys play before they head into the next year. And at that point, those teams are probably not going to be at their peak. Even if they keep the full roster together, and we'll talk about roster stability in just a second, if let's use the example again, Shopify Rebellion, they win the 2023 Ascension tournament. Are they going to be the best tier 2 team in 2024, in 2025? Almost certainly not. It's not the way that the league works currently. That's not the way that, it's not the way that the scene or circuit works currently. That would be an extraordinary achievement. And so what you're likely to get is tier 2 teams that used to be good, but not the tier 2 teams that are currently good, competing in VCT, competing in the international leagues. And I think that that is a big miss. And also from the player's perspective, let's think about this. You're a Shopify Rebellion player. Apologies to all the Shopify Rebellion players and staff that I'm just using you as an example, but you're a player and you're competing in 2023. You know that you haven't made it into franchising, but this is your best option. It's a super team of tier 2 players. Let's go out there. Let's win. Your motivation has to come that you know you're going to be still in there for 2024. And I think most players are motivated by the opportunity to win when they're good, not win and never get the opportunity to showcase that they could beat international teams at their best and have to wait until the next calendar year to compete. A super team that's put together at the beginning of 2023 will only start to play in the best tournaments midway through 2024. So I think that that is one of my primary misses with this system. Now, the other part to this as well is you need player protections in place. Because if I was Shopify Rebellion and I win in North America for Ascension, if I know I'm not going to be able to compete in 2024, the team starts to drop off, they're not doing as well in scrims, we had a honeymoon run, we only won at the end of the year, we weren't even good for most of 2023, but we won like the Ascension tournament at the end after being 8th seed, and I just don't think we're going to be able to do it again, then the problem is, what protections are in place to keep these players in there? Oh, the Washington Post article talks about that. Okay, well, let's take a look at that then. On the subreddit, let's go. Let's go. Because hello. Where are we then? Washington Post, let's have a look. Because I asked some of these questions, but we will allow Mikhail to take a look at this as well. Whoop-a-dee-dee-dee. Go away. All right, so this is all information we've already talked about as well. Da-da-da-da. Yeah, we've already talked about this stuff as well. Here we go. Roselle explained that roster protections similar to those in place for League of Legends esports would be instituted across the international leagues. These protections will help safeguard challenger teams that make it to the international teams from having all of their talent poached by partner teams. Not really the concern, in my opinion. I really don't think that poaching is the concern at all. I think it's the fact that people are going to want to upgrade their rosters. I think that's the major concern. But sure, poaching will also have some degree, and so having stuff in place is important. Contracts, roster composition, and player transfer windows will be standardized. Okay. But I didn't get anything crystal clear about this, just that protections would be in place. And it doesn't look like this article has anything either. No. So this article says that there will be protections in place, but not anything specific. So I think the devil is really in the details here, because how many players is there a number of players you need to keep your spot? Because it's going to be the organization that has the spot for those 2 years, not the roster. The org is going to have the spot. And what that means is, if you're allowed to change 2 players when you come in 2024 and 2 players when you go into the next year, or, if that number's larger, if you're allowed to change 3 or something like that, then you will have a roster that doesn't really look the same as the team that deserved to get there in the first place. And I think that this is going to have a couple of different branching. I think this is going to have a bunch of different consequences at the end of it as well. Yeah, there is a players association now working with Riot as well, so I think that seems really important too. So what I think is most likely is that it's the core of 3, because that's the rule that they're currently working with. I don't know that that's the case, and in fact, a core of 2 has been rumored and reported for partnerships teams next year in terms of how many players they need from a region, right? because that's also something that you've got to bear in mind here too, right? Your team that wins 2023. Let's use where should we go here? Let's try an Oceanic team, right? So an Oceanic team wins the Ascension tournament in 2023. That Oceanic team, according to what's rustling around in the reports and rumors right now, needs only 2 Oceanic players on the team in order to still be an APAC team. Maybe they'll make it 3, which seems to make more sense to me, but, you know, between 2 and 3. Yeah, so you could have 3 North American players and 2 Oceanic players on that team to make up the 5. It also, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been publicly stated that those would have to be active players. So maybe you can just put, you know, the Oceanic players on the bench and play with a full American roster or something. I think there's a lot of details here that need to be explained more thoroughly to explain how players from those regions are being protected. But okay, let's assume that it's 2 Oceanic players, 3 American players, and you win Ascension, you go into 2024. Now, let's assume for this situation that you didn't sign a 2-year contract, although one of the effects that I think this will ripple down into Tier 2 is that people will be really wanting to sign multi-year contracts. Multi-year contracts, though, don't really mean anything if players can get let go for no reason. But, okay, so you've got these 2 Oceanic players, the 3 American players. If you're allowed to change out some of those players, if you're allowed at the transfer window to change, let's say 2 of them, this 5-man team now becomes your core from which the roster must sprout from. Do you need to keep these 2 Oceanic players? Can you only ever change the others? Or can you now change all of those players? Can you keep the core of the 3 American players and change out the Oceanic players despite the fact that you are playing in the APAC League? I think there's so many details here that need to be fleshed out for us to understand what's going on, because there are many ways in which I think it would be easy for organizations, once they get into these 2 years of promotion, to mix around their players in a way that doesn't really represent the league that they're playing in or the team that got them to that point. So I think there are details here that just haven't really been explained. But the biggest takeaway from it all is that you need safeguards in place to make sure that the orgs don't just change up all of their players. And that is what they're talking about here. So it's good that they've already got those in place. But I think you also need some safeguards in place to ensure that the team remains relevant to the league that it's playing in. Because otherwise, Tier 2 teams are going to want to participate in the weakest region possible. They're not going to... I mean, there are other things that factor in there as well. For example, like the fact that I highly imagine this Americas League is going to get massively more viewership than many of these Pacific leagues. So maybe you would still want to compete in Americas because it's getting, 100K viewership compared to 20K or something like that over in APAC. There are going to be those kind of concerns too. But I think at the end of the day, most Tier 2 teams, rather than getting viewership, are going to want to be into the partnership system, at least for a couple of years. And that means that they're probably going to try and find the weakest areas to go and play in, as NIP did when they went over to Brazil, that netted them a Masters appearance. And I think that organizations are going to heavily want to do that. It's kind of cool because big organizations are incentivized there to work in smaller regions. But I think once it starts to get to a point where players are being imported to try and get into the partnership system and they can be changed afterwards, that to me is a weird one. What else? What else was I going to talk about as well? So the other thing as well that I'm not sure whether it was in the announcement or not, because I haven't read all the way through this one. I just talked to somebody about it. In the off season, the Tier 1 teams and the Tier 2 teams are allowed to play together, which might seem obvious, But previously, developers have not wanted that to happen, especially when the Tier 2 system does not play with the Tier 1 teams at any point in their qualifying year. You know, these Tier 2 teams never play against a Tier 1 team during the main season, but they are allowed to play in the off-season. And maybe that will change as the off-season, you know, we figure out what even happens in an off-season, because this will be our first one coming up after Champions this year. How many tournament organizers are even interested? You know, do the Tier 1 teams even want to play in those kind of things? Or is it all just a big transfer window where no one wants to compete? You know, once those kind of things get sorted out, then it'll probably be much more reasonable to discuss about whether or not we're going to have a healthy offseason with Tier 1 teams and Tier 2 teams playing against each other. But I like the fact that there are no prohibitions at the moment in terms of having those play against each other. So I think that's pretty cool. Couple of questions. Can you talk briefly about the number of sub-leagues in EMEA? So the sub-leagues in EMEA, they've got Northern Europe, Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, Portugal, France, and Benelux. They've got a dark one, Turkey, Eastern Europe, MENA. Not all of these are going to have the same viewership. I would imagine not all of these are going to have the same resources dedicated to them as well. But they're all not going to overlap with the international tournaments going on. I mean, even at the moment, the VRLs have different amounts of production support and different amounts of viewership as well. I would imagine it's going to be very similar to the EMEA VRL system, and I think that's why they tried it out this time as well. Yeah, just the same as this year. France, Spain, people are going to want to get into those. They deleted the CIS VRL. I wonder if they'll bring it back in a couple of years. I believe this Eastern Europe one is going to be the CIS one, essentially. They've just called it Eastern Europe. I would imagine that is going to be essentially the same thing. When the game comes out in China and blows up, will additional teams from China get added to the main league or the Challengers League? Only thing that worries me is how China will be integrated. Well, if you look at the Washington Post article that I just closed, they've actually got a quote in here that I was unaware of, where they said, where is it? Here it is. For now, there are no plans for additional partnership slots. So, if they were planning to add additional partnership slots for Chinese organizations, I would imagine that they would announce that, because that's a very obvious thing that's going to be coming up. The game is going to be released in China. There's going to be Chinese teams, etc., etc. But what this indicates to me is they probably already are looking at Chinese partners. I mean, there's going to be 10 teams in APAC. There's probably already a Chinese team there, no? I think someone reported the distribution within APAC, and there was like a couple of Chinese teams, no? Who was it? Someone reported on this and looked at the distribution. Bodog? Oh, there was no Chinese slots reported within that. Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? That's going to be an unusual one. I have no idea. I highly doubt that they're going to add a whole extra 10 teams from China. Unless the game goes... I mean, here's the other thing to keep in mind, guys. Riot have got a massive 5-year plan plus here. But this is a 6-year plan, sorry. Riot have got a 6-year plan right now. This is going to change within 6 years. It just is. The popularity of the game will change. How they feel about their system is going to change. The esports space is going to change in terms of how much salaries command, whether content creation becomes massive, and that shifts things around. So you don't have to worry too much about it being utterly rigid and inflexible. I think that there will be room to, maneuver things around. I think this is just supposed to be a good long-term structure so that people know roughly what the aim is going to be heading in. Oh, nice. A little advert being run. So yeah, that was... I don't have any further information about the China stuff. I think that that's a really interesting point to monitor, honestly. I can't really imagine that they would have 0 Chinese teams for next year, because they have a Chinese team playing at Champions. So clearly they're not too bothered about Chinese players competing despite the game not being out. It's not like a legal barrier in place. So I don't know. What else? What is this tweet? Someone's sending me a tweet for Chinese scene. What is this? The game isn't approved, so it can't be there yet, but things like FG... Who is this person? Liquipedia Wiki Manager. Okay. I mean, I don't think they're working with any information here. I think that's just you found someone that's tweeting their opinions about what's happening. So, are 30 teams worldwide enough? Yes. 30 teams is enough, I think. And when it gets up to 42, I think somewhere between 10 and 16 teams is great for these kind of franchise things. If Challengers Org signed players for 2 years, wouldn't that make partnered orgs disadvantaged as all of the upcoming talent is locked up in Tier 2? Yeah, so, I'm glad you brought this up, Darkerplex, because that's something else that I was going to discuss, is that when you look at how this is going to work, one of the protections in place, if I'm a Tier 2 player, I would want something in my contract that says, if we get the organization into partnerships, we want some stability with the contract. And maybe that's going to be something that the league, that Riot itself mandates. But I, as a player, would probably want that written in as well. And I think that maybe that will allow enough flexibility so that people aren't locked into multi-year contracts, 18-month contracts, stuff like that. Because if the players all end up going for long-term contracts, that means that the teams that are actually in the international league will have to pay buku money for big upcoming players. But I also don't think that that's a particular problem. I think when you're looking at the situation, you'll have a lot of teams competing in Tier 2 who aren't making a lot of money. They're willing to invest the money because the payoff is huge. But I think part of how you keep Tier 2 afloat as well is reasonable buyouts. The Tier 2 system should be a farm academy kind of system. And then they should be rewarded for that by getting buyouts paid by the teams in the international league. So I think that's... Yeah, I think that that's not a terrible thing. I think that will be... I think that'll be a decent idea. So here's some of the other things I asked as well. What happens if a team... what happens if an organization gets into promotion that isn't a real org, Like Lenny Time wins Ascension. I don't know whether that would ever happen, because the players would always want a competitive salary heading in. I just don't see a world where it does happen. I think the lowest you would get is like in the APAC region or something. You could have organizations that are very small find a team that goes on a run at the end of the year and they end up getting in. I don't really see how that could cause massive problems. I think it'll just sort itself out, essentially, by virtue of good players are more likely to go to good organizations or organizations that offer competitive salaries. And so you'll end up having larger organizations involved in these promotion systems anyway. Another thing that's interesting too is there was a report, tweet, something like that I read a while back that I don't know whether it was bullshit or not, but it was saying that the people involved in partnerships are going to be mandated to have a women's team and an academy team for 2023. I can imagine Riot making that kind of... That was just false? Right, okay. That makes sense. Because it makes no sense that the partnership teams would all have academy teams playing in tier 2, because then if the academy team gets promoted, you've just got horrendous conflict of interest going on. So it doesn't make any sense for there to be academy teams, in my opinion, within this system. However, I think it would be cool if they were all mandated to provide a women's team. Yeah. What else? There needs to be a buyout cap for tier 2. You can't have players like Scuba having a high 6 figures price tag. That's just a hypothetical. Don't take it too seriously. But yeah, I think I don't think you really. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's really down to. I don't think that should be mandated from the top. I think that should be based on how you sign in contracts at the beginning, because I think it should be a factor of your salary. I think structuring buyouts so that they're in proportion to the salary that you're being paid makes far more sense for people to be signing contracts that work like that, rather than just a fixed fee that just locks someone in contract jail forever. And yeah, I agree. That's something the Players Association and their agents need to address. I don't think that's something that Riot needs to go for. Sideshow, can you talk about the fact that you can win champions and get relegated the year after? Yeah, so that's a bit of a bonkers one as well, right? Because you are guaranteed to get relegated 2 years after you win Ascension. So in theory, you could have a team that wins Ascension. They could even win champions back to back, if we want to talk about truly bonkers scenarios. And then they would get guaranteed relegated the next year. However, in all likelihood, I think what would end up happening is that those players would just get signed by another partnered league, another partnered team. There's no world where you win champions and you become a free... Because, listen, if you're a team in this year, 2025, you won Ascension in 2023, you're in 2025, Shopify motherfucking Rebellion, and you're a cracked team, you know that you've got a shot at it, you're not signing a multi-year contract at this point. You know that your organization is not involved in the International League the year after. Why would you ever sign a contract that lasts into 2026? So all of the players should be becoming free agents at the end of the year in which the org is done. You know, the org is getting relegated. At that point, with the players being free agents, they should be getting snapped up. And if they win champions, the whole team will get snapped up by some team that's really struggling in the International League. So I don't think that to me is a concern for players. I don't think as a player, you should think, oh, I can win champions and then just be out. Because there's no fucking shot. From an org's perspective, that can definitely be the case. And that would be double salty, because you're almost guaranteed to lose your winning team as well. Because when the org gets relegated, like I said, there's no reason for the players to be on long-term contracts. So the org has done, presumably, a great job in terms of picking up some great tier 2 players. And if they won champions in 2025, if that happened, or in fact, if they just had a great team that made a semis or something like that and clearly deserves to be around in the International League, not only is the org then getting relegated in 2026, but they are almost certainly not going to have the funds to hold on to their team. And even if they had the funds, the team wouldn't even want to, because there'd be better offers elsewhere. So I think if you're coming at this from I really want the players to be protected, I don't think you have to worry about that, honestly. If you're coming at it from that kind of really sucks for the org involved. Yeah, it does. That really sucks for the org involved. But they've been rewarded for their hard work by having those 2 years of revenue sharing, of stipends, of all of that stuff. But they will have to build essentially from square one again. I mean, they'll be able to attract good talent from tier 2 because they'll probably have funds off the back of a successful 2024, 2025. They'll have funds to be able to do it, but they won't have a core to build from in all likelihood. So, yeah. What else have we got here? Couldn't you have non-partner tier 1 teams competing in the tier 1 circuit while simultaneously trying to get re-promoted for 2 more years? I don't understand your question, Study Cups, but it sounds like a good question. So you might want to rephrase it and ask again. Basically, the worst team in the season can be the best team just like that. Yeah, that's the way it works in any... I mean, that isn't how it works in any franchise system, but in most North American franchise systems, they literally have a draft so that the bad teams get the best players. That's like part of the reason. You don't want a bad team to be shit forever. You want there to be opportunities for the bad teams to bounce back. Let me tell you for a fact, you do not want the bad teams to be shit forever. There's a team in the Overwatch League that just got their first win 2 days ago, and they've been a bad team for the last 3 years. 3 years? 2022, 2021? I mean, 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Yeah, no, the Titans, Vancouver Titans. What else did we have here? Is Ascension before or after Champs? So they were specifically vague with this because they don't want to release the Tier 1 format yet. I imagine the Tier 1 format will be incoming at some point. I mean, maybe it'll be after Champions at this point that they'll discuss what it looks like in terms of dates and stuff. But the reason that there's no dates included in all of this stuff is because then it would be kind of obvious what the dates were for Tier 1, and they don't want to announce that yet. So, I don't know. I have no idea whether Ascension will be before or after Champions. I do know that it won't be at the same time, though, because they've said that they will have dedicated broadcast windows. This also means that, by the way, one of the added things here is, look how many leagues there are. And all of these will have some form of a broadcast. That's nuts. If you're an aspiring caster, that's a lot of potential talent that is going to be required to run these things. If you're a potential producer, if you're interested in logistics, all of that kind of stuff. There are going to be options and opportunities available. I always tell people, if you're looking to get into broadcasting, you should try and get in on the ground floor of a game because you'll have the best options available. And if you're trying to get into Valorant, you kind of missed that already. The ground floor of the game was like, 2020. But I think this is a new opportunity to actually get into stuff. If you're trying to build up your portfolio so that you might get picked up for one of these, or if you're like, you're a caster, but you speak one of these languages that's happening in EMEA or the Pacific regions, you could definitely have a shot. Definitely have a shot. Having said that, only one in North America, Omega Lol. So most of my viewers, if you're trying to get into a North American one, probably not as many opportunities as the rest of the case, the rest of the world. Yeah. What else have we got here? If Tier 1 contracts end by 2025, couldn't Riot just sign the cracked Tier 2 org as a Tier 1 org and not renew the contract of a slacking org? No. There is very specifically not going to be relegation. They are not going to do that. If you're one of the teams that got in on partnerships this year, which they haven't told anybody that they're in, although there's certain teams that are very likely to be involved, very, very likely, and they've shortlisted it and stuff like that according to the reports. If you're one of those teams that gets in this year, you are in. Somewhat permanently. I imagine if the entire org just fell to pieces and went bankrupt or whatever like that, then there might be some shifting around. It happens in, F1, for example, where you don't just get changes of the ownership groups, but you actually get changes of the branding and everything associated with it too. So, there are probably some emergency measures in place, but there's not going to be a system where a Tier 2 team is dominating and you want to keep them forever so they become a permanent partner. At least that is not something that they've said they're going to do at this point. There is going to be a constant rotation of Tier 2 organizations up at the top level. Yeah. What else? How do you imagine they assign the Americas region spots? I don't know, but it's already been talked about a little bit with people that have much more information than me. Where does all of this leave third-party tournaments and international third-party events? The Tier 2 and Tier 1 teams are going to be able to compete in third-party events together. That will be the off-season at the end of the year, which will be after Champions. Unless Ascension is after Champions, but I don't think it's going to be. I don't know, actually. I really don't know. But to me, Champions should probably be the end of the year. So I would find it very strange if Ascension was after Champions, but it might be. It might be. Anyway, the point there being that there is going to be some time in the calendar, at least for 2023 and 2024, to run third-party events. Hopefully, it looks good. Oh, wait, no. Sorry. There is going to be enough. There is going to be a third-party window for 2022 and 2023. And I think hopefully it just goes well this year and the tier 2 teams, the tier 1 teams want to compete and it gets good viewership and the partners are interested in continuing that for the future. Look at Noin's tweet. Investors are pressuring Riot for 12 teams. Investors. You haven't linked Noin's tweet. You've just said go and look at Noin's tweet. If you link it, I will click it. What investors does that even mean? Let's have a look at the tweet anyway. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum, where are we looking? Where are we looking? Oh, here we go. Do we have it translated in the comments? No. Let's have a look. Translate. Okay. I'm going to tell you some things I've heard about the franchise in the last few days. Riot is still deciding, but some ideas have already been discarded. They're actually looking into ways to implement slots for non-franchise teams in the Masters and Champions. So this is what... Sorry, I'll bring it up on the screen. So this is what... Oh, so this was tweeted 5 hours ago before this announcement came out. Is this just old info? Yeah, I think this is old info. I think this is just old. Because at this point, they've announced that there's going to be 10 slots. So I think they've probably already just had this discussion. I highly doubt that this is more up to date than what they've released. Yeah, I think this is just out of date info that's not worth really taking into account. Any thoughts about all the orgs that left Valorant prematurely in the last month? Do you think they will come back? I think for each organization, it comes down to, do they feel that they can put together a roster that will be able to win with the rest of the teams out? And I think that there's a decent chance, if you're good at scouting, that you can. Like, I think, if you think about the way that this is going to work, in 2023, or rather, at the end of this year, in 2022, teams are going to put together their rosters for 2023 International League. If you're a North American team that didn't make it into partnerships, and you already know that, your job is to try and find the best talent that doesn't get snatched up and persuade them to all get on the same team in order to make this Ascension run happen. And I think for a decent number of organizations, it's going to be worth making that investment in order to potentially be a partner team for 2 years. I think that seems like a good enough investment from the orgs. Yeah, I don't know why it would be phrased as investors. I don't know who that even is referring to. I'm not paying any attention to that tweet. Bo already said that 2 teams are scouting talent. 2 teams who dropped their roster in the last month are already re-scouting talent. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I doubt it will be worth it for only 2 years. I think it probably will be. You're banking on the fact that... So, what you're looking at here is, for 2 years, you have guaranteed revenue streams of... I mean, you're getting a stipend of $600K per year, and you're getting revenue share that... If your org has good branding, and if your org is popular, which it probably will be if it's a top tier 2 team, because people love being the fucking elitists that think the tier 2 teams are the best. You know, if you're able to do, like, the runaway stuff, right? For any Overwatch League fans, there was a team called Runaway. Their branding was bright pink. They had great players. They were winning everything. Everyone knew that they could compete on an international level. We're talking, you are going to make buku money from a gun buddy that has your branding on it. And you're going to be bringing in $500,000 in stipends. There's no way that you're not making over $1 million a year from that kind of stuff. And more so in terms of sponsorships too, because you're involved in a premier product that can be game-changing for organizations. Absolutely game-changing. 2 years of being in a tier 1 esport up at the top can change an org, can change the trajectory of an org entirely, from being one that no one really knows or cares about to being one that's maybe not a household name, but if you capitalize on that, being one that everyone knows and the branding is ubiquitous across esports and sponsors want to be involved with. So I don't think 2 years is too little time at all. I mean, 2 years' time is enough for a lot of orgs to even be, well known. Most organizations, if they have a team that pops off, you know about them after a couple of years. It's a long time. Yeah, exactly. Sentinels. That's a great point. Literally Sentinels. Sentinels had, Booga, and that was it at the World Cup. And then they'd sign the top team from Valorant and start winning tournaments, and they sign 10s, and they go ultra fucking demon mode. And now they're the biggest team in Valorant. And even if Sentinels were only in Tier 2 this year, like 2023, if Sentinels were only in the Tier 2 system, they would still be one of the most popular teams. And then, they always have opportunities to get back into Tier 1 as well. So yeah, I think you're fine. I think you're fine. If you get auto-relegated, do you get a shot at Ascensions? Yes, but you'll have lost the core of the team that was winning you that, in all likelihood. I doubt anyone's going to be able to retain a winning core when they get relegated. They might retain a losing core, but then that's probably not going to win you Ascension. Could a partner team sell their spot? Interesting idea. So the idea there being something like Shopify Rebellion. I keep using Shopify Rebellion. They win Ascension. They go in. They're guaranteed for 2024, 2025, but they say, fuck it. We don't actually want to run a tier 1 team. We just want to sell the spot. I have no idea. Because the spot is definitely worth something, and Riot can't force them to participate. But would Riot be okay with them giving the spot to somebody else? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt that Riot will be okay with you selling the spot, but you can't... A team could, I guess, theoretically decline or go bankrupt before they were even ready to take the spot. And I'm not exactly sure what would happen there, but I imagine it would just be the second place team from Ascension makes it through, which would be rough for the players. But I think that would be a once ever kind of scandal. Why would anyone decline being in the tier 1 system? That would be bonkers. So yeah, I doubt that a situation like that would rear their head. So yeah. Yeah, Riot owns the spot. Yes. And exactly, I mean, you literally invested in the team in order to get into the partnership. There's no real reason that they would do that. But the LEC stuff with Misfits, they own that spot. With these promotion systems, the org doesn't own the spot. The org is entitled to partnership stuff, but I don't believe they would own the spot in any sense. No idea how this would affect game changers. I imagine it's going to be pretty insane if they have game changers running all year, as well as tier 2, as well as tier 1, and all of them have different broadcast schedules that don't overlap. That seems extremely difficult to me, but maybe possible. I don't know. And they've also said that, where is it? They said that there was a system for getting, here we go. The in-game competitive system is still being worked on, and this indicates that it should be ready for 2023, I guess, which would be incredible. But they also said, where did they say as well? They said something about the amateur teams playing against the lower level challengers teams, right? They said that somewhere. Damn it, where is it? So, I'm trying to find where I read this thing. Looking ahead to 2024. Yeah, where is that? Okay, Control F 2024. There we go. Thank you, Paula. So it says here, Path Champions begins directly within Valorant. They're going to, work on their kind of clash system. And they're looking to directly implement it into VCT. So if you're the top teams from Clash, you will have an opportunity to qualify directly from the Clash tournament system into Challengers. And that means that the lowest ranked Challengers teams will have to play promotion relegation games against online Clash players, which is fucking bonkers. They'll also be there are open qualifiers, but that is that hints at a really cool system. Again, I suppose the devil is in the details with all of this stuff, but if they're building a system that's good enough to integrate straight into VCT, it will probably be so good for us to just enjoy playing casually. Because I don't know about you, I don't have any aspirations of playing in VCT. I doubt most of the people in my chat have aspirations of playing in VCT, but it would still be fucking cool to play some proper, tournament-esque games. I loved playing in the most recent one we did with Egg Enthusiasts. So I think this would be sick. You guys all have aspirations of playing in VCT, do you? Barla says, I want to play leagues, though. Rather than tournaments, you'd rather play a league? I don't think I really care, honestly. Yeah, the ranked demons are going to be everywhere. Will a lot of the best Clash players just be pro players, though? I think almost certainly in order to qualify for this, tournament, you would have to not be a pro player. I mean, almost certainly. No, I don't have any other information on the North American Valorant Players Association. I was surprised that there was one, actually. I hadn't heard anything about it. I think that's everything I wanted to discuss. So in summary, I think it's an excellent system that's been very well thought through, that has enough incentives involved to keep organizations willing to invest in the tier 2 scene. And that means players are not going to be playing for breadcrumbs. So what's good for the org there is good for the players. I think I want the two things I think I need more, well, not two things I need more info about, but two things that I think this article doesn't fix. I need more information on safeguards of players, like how a roster that qualifies to Ascension is going to be safeguarded for the next 2 years, so that the teams don't just get either picked to pieces or completely upgraded when they realize that they can't compete internationally, and whether or not you can, whether or not those safeguards extend to people that are on the bench as well. Like, if I just bench my 5 players, they are still technically on the team and being salaried, but I would never play them. Does that get around the rules? I think there's a lot of details there that need to be ironed out. And I think, to be honest, the only thing in this system that I think is a big miss is having the top tier 2 teams not get wildcard spots to Masters and Champions. I think having the top tier 2 teams get a wildcard spot, even if they just got grouped every time, would be an excellent spectacle and addition. And I think, especially for champions, when you have, you know, this team that won Ascension is going to be playing next year with all of the big boys. So why not give them a shot, a wild card of doing it on their run in? Worst case scenario, they go out in groups and it was a wasted spot. Best case scenario, what, they win champions and they go on, the tier 2 team wins champions and goes on to be the favorites in their first year of promotion. That shit would be fucking sick. So I think that would be a nut system. That to me is the only area in which this has missed. But otherwise, a pretty excellent, an excellent system.